In October of 1978, there were two Italian cardinals that thought they might be the next pope. It was Franz Cardinal König, the Archbishop of Vienna, who suggested to his fellow cardinals another candidate, a Polish cardinal named Karol Józef Wojtyła. He was elected pope. In 1982, President Ronald Reagan and his wife Nancy visited the Vatican. If you watch the videos on YouTube, the Reagans were greeted in the Vatican by John Paul II, and you can clearly see that they had a special bond and a genuine friendship with John Paul II. Ronald Reagan would often say, "He is my best friend. Yes, you know I am a Protestant, but he is still my best friend." The Reagans were greeted like rock stars. John Paul II was also greeted by Ronald Reagan when he visited the United States with that same excitement. Years ago, I bought a large picture that I have in my office of Ronald Reagan and John Paul II sitting together. I didn't know much about the picture, I just liked it. Years later, I learned that it was taken at the Vizcaya Museum in Miami, Florida. It was taken on the first day of the Pope's first visit to the United States on September 10th, 1987. John Paul II came to America to celebrate with Ronald Reagan and all of the American people the 200th anniversary of the signing of the Constitution. He came to America because he loved America. He loved our freedom, and he prayed for the success of our country. He wanted Poland and the Polish people to have that same freedom and those same opportunities for prosperity that Americans enjoyed. John Paul II grew up as a normal kid, but his world would change. When he was 19, the Nazis invaded Poland, and a few days later, the Soviets invaded Poland as well. And he and millions of people watched as Poland would once again disappear. He watched as intellectuals were taken to prison, universities were closed, and churches were destroyed. Like many others, he saw his country being destroyed by war and the evil forces of communism. He entered the seminary in secret because it was illegal to study religion. He saw Poland briefly liberated in 1946, but by that following year, in 1947, Poland would once again be under the grip of the Soviet Union. In 1956, Cardinal Stefan Wyszynski was released from 3 years of house arrest. He announced to the Polish people that they should prepare for the 100th anniversary of Christianity in Poland in 1966. He wanted 9 years of a novena, 9 years of prayer. Every parish began secretly praying and learning once again who they were as Polish Catholics and about their Polish heritage. For many years, the Polish people remained strong in their faith, despite a government that despised God and despised religion. On October 16th, 1978, the world and the people of Poland would see their native son elected pope. He never forgot the struggles of his fellow countrymen, and being a great man of vision and of great fidelity, he made it a priority that he would go back and visit Poland. He asked the government if he could go and visit for 2 days in May of 1979. He wanted to be there for the 900th anniversary of the death of St. Stanislaus, but the government said no. They realized that this was too dangerous. However, they said, "You can come for 9 days in June." These would be 9 days that would change Poland and would change the entire world. On the Feast of Pentecost in Victory Square in Warsaw, over 3 million people gathered for Mass. They applauded for over 15 minutes. The people looked around and they realized they were free. They said to one another, "There are more of us than there are of them." They realized that they were at a Mass that would make history and change the world. They saw before their very eyes the suppression and the grayness of life in which they had lived for so many years was going to be taken away and going to change. The moment he arrived in Poland, John Paul II stepped off the plane and he kissed the ground. During those 9 days, 1/3 of the people in Poland saw him in person. Millions of people saw him on TV. What they were watching and what they saw was one man getting ready to liberate millions of people. It was an incredible moment, and it would begin the fall of communism. The power of the papacy was never more evident. The Soviets realized that he was about to turn their evil empire upside down. He prayed at the Mass, "Let your Spirit descend, let your Spirit descend, and renew the face of the earth and the face of this land." The land he's referring to is Poland itself. You could not contest the power of the communists by force. It had to be confronted and contested by a spiritual power. From that point on, people began to say to themselves, "I'm not going to live like this anymore. I want to be free." From his humble roots in Krakow, he became the leader of 1 billion Catholics and one of the most recognized, loved, and influential men of our lifetime. He had the second longest pontificate, lasting over 26 years. To millions of people, he was the Pope of Hope. During his pontificate, John Paul II made trips to 129 different countries, traveled over 750,000 miles, canonized and made saints of some of our favorites, Padre Pio, Maximilian Kolbe, and Faustina Kowalska. He preached compassion and understanding. As he entered St. Peter's Square to address an audience on May 13, 1981, Pope John Paul II was shot and critically wounded by a trained gunman who was a member of a militant fascist group, probably payback for what he started back in Poland. 2 days after Christmas in 1983, 2 years later, John Paul II visited his assassin in prison. His would-be killer asked him, "Why didn't you die?" "I know my aim was true, and I know the bullet was very powerful and mortal." The Pope responded, "One hand fired the shot, the other guided it." The other hand he's referring to is the hand of the Blessed Mother. As a measure of gratitude, John Paul II gave one of the 4 bullets that struck him to the shrine of Our Lady of Fatima. The bullet was put inside the crown of the statue of the Virgin of Fatima. He forgave his shooter. He genuinely lived a life imitating Christ in every possible way. He cared for those who were not yet born and for those who were about to die. He was the voice of the voiceless. He left this world as a witness to the dignity of human life. So, my friends, the world owes a great debt of gratitude to many people who fought for freedom around the world. St. John Paul II, Ronald Reagan, and others were instrumental in ending communism in Poland and eventually all of Europe. Both quietly came out of nowhere to take the world stage and take their place in the world and bring hope to millions of people. Both were shot in 1981, and both of them forgave their shooters. They displayed courage that changed the course of history. Both were champions of freedom, and with no army, they defeated communism with just their words. And most importantly, they believed, as others do as well looking back, that they were called and guided by God to do great things for world freedom. Years ago, Father Felix and I had the pleasure and the privilege of being at the Vatican and being able to have a Mass in the Pope's private chapel. There were about 40 people, and after the Mass was over, the Pope came out into a big room, and he greeted most of the people, and we were one of the last peoples that got greeted. And he gave rosary beads to everybody. He gave us our beads, and then he walked away. So we realized we'd probably just been ignored by the Pope. But then Father Felix started talking in Polish, and he said he was from Wallington. And all of a sudden, the Pope turned around, came back, and started to talk to Felix in Polish. So it's kind of amazing that of all the parishes of the world, all the churches of the world, John Paul II knew Wallington and he knew Most Sacred Heart. I could never have imagined as an Italian-American kid growing up that I would grow up one day and meet such an incredible human being. Maybe 41 years ago or so, you saw John Paul II in Poland live. Maybe you were there. Maybe you were able to come to this beautiful country because of the freedoms that he fought for. Tomorrow, May 18th, will be St. John Paul II's 100th anniversary. This is a beautiful day worth celebrating in some way. Every day, during the day, even at night, I will see someone on the front lawn saying their quiet prayers to John Paul II, no doubt trusting in him, asking him to intercede for them. It is very beautiful to know that after all these years, people still turn to him and he is not forgotten. Take the time tomorrow to remember in your prayers this extraordinary man's courage and faithfulness and bravery. He loved America, he loved Poland, and he fought so hard for millions to be free. Those millions are us as well, my friends. He was a soldier for freedom who never stepped foot on the battlefield, but he took 4 bullets for us, for standing up for the freedom of millions of people. Perhaps as Catholics and Americans, we can continue our commitment to praying for our country. Pray that God will guide and inspire more men and women who will dedicate their lives to protecting our country and to promote and defend the beautiful gift of freedom.